All right, so thank you everybody for joining us. My name's Tim Heng. I'm sort of the founder of the Sydney Excel user group, and would like to welcome everyone for joining us this session on using forms and Excel. Um, for those people joining us, just a couple of little bits of admin before we get started. First of all, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, which is really Sydney CBD. So apologies for anyone who's not based here right now, such as Woy Woy, for example. Do please stay on mute unless you're presenting or asking a question. Use the raise hand tool to indicate that you want to ask a question. I'll try my best to keep an eye out for raise hands or the meeting chat, and I think probably other MVPs might be around or other staff might sort of grab my attention, please, if I'm missing anything while I'm presenting. Um, but most importantly, show everyone else respect and consideration when you're in the chat. And so, Tim, Darragland, where you are, excellent. I love the fact that you know exactly what it is. So you've either done a lot of presentations or you've got respect for the people there, which is fantastic. All right. So for those who aren't aware of what we're doing here, the Sydney Excel user group is basically a user group to help bring Excel users together to share ideas, tips and tricks. Hopefully we'd like to think we're going to bring in a range of Excel experts to talk about different topics. Last month we had Casey from the Microsoft team present on all the new things that are going on in Excel. Danielle Stein-Fairhurst is on this call. She's going to be running a session in August. Next month, we've got a session by Excel MVP David Benaim on Excel and Google Sheets. So hopefully we'll be bringing in a range of different experts to talk about, I guess, the different tools that are available within the Excel and Office family. And the idea is that we'll be promoting best practices to help improve efficiency and effectiveness. The idea is that these sessions are supposed to be accessible to everybody, that you don't need to be a super expert in financial modeling or in data analysis or a data scientist to be able to take benefit from this. The idea is that hopefully there should be something here that if you're fresh out of university, you'll still be able to benefit from it. If you're someone with 20 years of experience, then you'll still be able to get benefit out of it and should be able to learn something new. I guess a little bit about me. My name is Tim Heng, like I mentioned. I'm a director of a company called Some Product. We're a consulting firm that's based in Sydney. Been an MVP for a few years now. I think it's like fourth. I think I've had my fourth award or something like that. And I'm super passionate about trying to basically just build up the level of overall knowledge in the industry. It really frustrates me that people try, they use Google Sheets or they use, Google surveys and so forth, just because they don't know that a Microsoft product exists that does this, or because they don't know that Excel Online is free and so forth. And so my mission is essentially just awareness building and making sure people actually understand what you're actually able to achieve with the tools that you have in front of you, and why you don't necessarily need to go out of your organization and out of your toolkit just to solve a particular problem. So with that in mind, we're going to be talking about forms in Excel. And I don't have a fancy presentation about this because I'm the sort of person who hates death by PowerPoint. So what I'm actually going to do is jump straight into Excel. If I can find my browser. Hold on one second. We're going to be working in Excel Online because that is essentially where we're going to find, I guess, forms and how best to integrate Excel and forms together. So for those of you who aren't aware what forms are effectively a survey tool in Excel or in the Microsoft suite. You might be familiar with, I think it's, can't remember what the Google equivalent is called, whether it's Google Forms or Google Surveys or something like that. But it's essentially the same principle. You've got the ability to create a form to be able to ask questions and get responses from people. So I've just pull open a form that I've created in the past. You can basically put headings in, put in labels and descriptions, and ask questions. Ask people to select from a set of options. You can get people to drop in a rating of 1 to 10, 1 to 5, and so forth. There's a range of different input features that you can use with Microsoft Forms. And it's a pretty straightforward sort of tool. Simply choose the sort of item that you want to ask, like add a new question. You can choose what sort of question it is. In this case, the basic ones are a choice, text entry, a rating, calendar dates, and so forth. You actually do have the ability to let people upload files, though that is only when you have when you're sort of sharing it within your organizations. So these forms, I should note, can be shared internally within your org, or alternatively be sent out publicly. And so the forms that we're going to be building today are essentially going to be public forms, which have a couple more restrictions. So in a nutshell, forms just allow you to collect information and you can pick up responses and the forms system has a little user interface that allows you to quickly see what the form results are. You can open these results in Excel. So I can just pull this open. It's going to open up an Excel file that I can now open. Let me just pull this over onto screen. Clicking on this, and we can see, this is pretty straightforward, right? You open up an Excel file, contains a list of the responses, and yeah, it's pretty straightforward. But the problem with this, and I think one of the issues that people run into when they start building forms, is that they go down this path where they go to, first of all, to forms.office.com, which takes you to this office.com link. And then they click on new form and they go wild and they create a 20-question survey or questionnaire that they want to send out to their friends or colleagues. And this all works reasonably well until you get to the point of actually collecting the data. Because once you build a form like this, you can pick up responses, you can open those in Excel, but effectively that Excel file is getting recreated every time you're interacting with the form. So if I download it today, that's going to be a form with 10 responses. If I download it tomorrow, that might be a form with 15 responses. And unfortunately, I can't take the form that I've downloaded, like this Excel file here, and hit refresh or do something to essentially reconnect it back to the actual form data. And this is probably one of the biggest problems with forms straight out of the box. The idea that when you create a form, it's actually really difficult to get a continuously updating data set if you haven't set it up the right way to start off with. There are a couple of ways using Power Automate to kind of work around this problem, but generally it's just much easier to set it up right in the first instance. And so the best way to set up a form isn't so much to use this new form button, but to actually use it in Excel instead. By working in Excel, you've got the ability, Excel Online specifically, you've got the ability to go to the Insert tab and click on Forms. And this basically allows you to create a new form and build it into this workbook that we're working in. So this is book 42 right now. Maybe I can save this. Oops, let's go File, Save As. We'll rename this to be Sydney Excel User Group, Forms and Excel. With that, and then we'll create a new form that we can then use. And this is now connected back to the Excel document that I was working on previously. So if I add a new question here, I can say text, question, what is your name? This might be a short answer question. By saving this here, I can then go back to my Excel form and I can see there's been a table that's set up here to allow me to take on the information, what is your name? And we can see that's just updated in real time as it's just come about. So I can add in additional questions. Let's create a new one that might be, let's see, another text field. Where are you based? And again, when I go back to my forms or my Excel document, we'll see that the table here gets updated with that new information. And as people load responses to this, my table in Excel is going to increase in size with those responses. So this is now a dynamic sheet that I can open up in Excel desktop, or I can open up in Excel on the web and be able to see it populate with new information as responses are submitted. So this is really the key thing. If you take nothing else out of the session, this is really the key thing. If you're going to use forms and Excel, start off in Excel. Start off specifically in Excel for the web. Insert a form from here. The interface to create the form is going to be exactly the same as creating the form directly within Microsoft Forms, but you have this permanent connection back to the Excel document that you're going to be working with, and that's really the important thing. It's worth noting, of course, that if you then move the Excel file off your SharePoint server or wherever it is that you're saving this, then all bets are off and everything may break accordingly. But that being said, if you're working on SharePoint Online, you can open the files in desktop and modify the file in Excel desktop, and it's not going to break this link back to the forms. So the goal of today isn't so much a big thing about let's use forms and let's sort of see all the ways that you can use forms and how to set it up properly. I thought I'd use this opportunity to basically ping the community and ask, what would you like to see in the Sydney Excel user group moving forward? We needed to create a form or a survey to start collecting information about the sorts of things you'd like to see. And I thought this might be an opportunity to kind of utilize some of the features that are in forms to collect that information and sort of build a form live as we go. So I'd love to kind of open up to people who are here on the call, either to unmute and sort of tell me what you'd like to see, or post it in the chat, either way. If we are launching a survey to people and asking, how do you, what would you like to see in the user group? What do you want to see presented? I kind of gave you a couple of examples of what's coming up, where David's running a session on Google Sheets versus Excel. Danielle's running a session on, I think, dynamic arrays and financial modeling, if I remember correctly. Danielle, please correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, what else would you like to see? Who are the sorts of people that you'd like to present? Do you want high-level topics or really in-depth topics? These are the sorts of questions that I'd like to sort of build into the form. And so if you can suggest ideas of what to do, happy to kind of build it in. So while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to answer a couple of quick questions in the chat. Paul, you've said, so forms is only available for online Excel. Don't see it in the desktop version, insert options or in the Microsoft Store. Yes, that is 100% correct. To be able to create a form that's linked out to an Excel document, you have to use Excel on the web. This was actually a feature that made it into the beta, one of the beta programs in Excel. So I think probably 2 or 3 years ago, Excel inside of Fast, or beta now, as it's called now, did get a version that had forms on its insert tab, and it doesn't anymore. It was this really weird thing where the button only appeared when you were working on a document that was saved in SharePoint, and I think it caused more confusion than it kind of worked for people, where people would open a file, they'd say, oh, I can't insert a form here. Why is that? And the obvious answer is because the file's not saved online. But I think the interface didn't make it very obvious to the user. And so it seems that the way Microsoft has gone is basically to force you to use it on the web. And that way, if you're connected on the web, then you're definitely working in a file that is online that can connect to forms. So that's kind of where it comes from, essentially. Hopefully that answers. I think, Carl, that answers your question as well, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you need to be in Excel on the web. And so if you're using Office 365, you can just simply jump online and go to office.com and create a new Excel workbook. Not on Home 365? That's a good question. It might be enterprise only, or the premium ones, because I think, and this is the licensing question I probably need to take back to Microsoft. The Forms is a little bit, licensing generally at Microsoft's a little bit weird. Casey herself was just admitting to us a couple of weeks ago that even she doesn't really understand all the licensing. Whether you've got a consumer license or a premium consumer license or an enterprise license. I'm using an enterprise license, so I've got an E5 license, which means that all the bells and whistles should be available. But I know that there are some things that are gated behind the business licenses. So technically consumer, but business premium, you do have some available, some features available there. My thought was that Forms would be available within business premium, but maybe not home, unfortunately. Melissa Dana had high hopes of using it for capturing our internal audit process at work. Excel 2016, yes, unfortunately not. Not an Excel 2016. You would basically just need someone with an E3 license, though, to get Excel 365, and then you can use their license to send out the survey. So it's not as if everybody in the organization needs to have an Office 365 license if you're happy to use the sort of the public link as such. So within Forms, you can either send things out as a within organization, or you can send it out as a public link. If I just quickly show you how this would work, you can see there's some different options for how you can collect responses. So people within your organization essentially are people who have an Azure Active Directory login, right? So something that the Microsoft servers can recognize you're part of this organization. And so if your organization's still in 2016, maybe that's not going to work. So what you might do is have an anyone can respond survey, but you only just need the one person to have the license to be able to send that out to people and start collecting data. As an example, one thing that I've done in the past, I'm part of a Facebook group for people who own Cavalier King Charles Spaniels. And so one of the things that I've done for them is basically set up a survey that allows them to basically populate a form and a table to kind of share birthdays, essentially. Let me see if I can find this exact thing here. I'll see if I can pull the links up. Cavaliers, let's find the topics. I probably should have got this one a little bit early in advance, but let's see if I can find this. Give me 1 second. Special dates. This is more of a bit of fun, I think, more than anything else. But just to kind of show you sorts of things that you can do with forms if you really want. This here is an example of a form that I've created in the past for the Cavaliers of New South Wales. Cavaliers, by the way, are these really cute dogs. If you've never seen what a Cavalier is, Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. These are the prototypical Lady and the Tramp, lady type dogs. They're perfectly useless for hunting or for fetching you out of wells, but incredibly cute and good for warming laps. So what people can basically do is type in their names, type in their dog's names, what color they are, date of birth, gotcha days, when the dog's passed away, if so, and sort of pop in any other comments they like. And this is basically linked up to an Excel document that sits on the back end. This Excel document, if I can pull this in place. Let me just move some information out of the way. This is linked up here, where we basically have a form that has a list of how many dogs are there here? 709 dogs. This has been going for about 2.5 years now, where it's basically a list of dogs. And every time someone adds a new dog to the form, it gets popped to the bottom of this list, and all the formulae. I've got a bunch of formulae in here that tries to track whose dog's birthday is it coming up, and sort of. I think, where is there? There should be a list of birthdays over here that kind of populates a data set that people can use to share birthdays and celebrate birthdays. Um, because naturally, if you're part of a dog group on Facebook, let's be honest, chances are you're probably in your mid 60s and just the kids have moved out and you've got the dogs at home, and these are your sort of your new fur kids, and so people like to celebrate these sorts of things. So this is essentially what we've done. We've basically created a form to capture all the relevant details, and then have a bunch of formulae in the table afterwards to um, just calculate, do some calculations to help populate my outputs that I'm looking for, which is a list of birthdays. Carl asked the question, does it allow spreadsheet entries? Yes, it does. You can basically, oh wait, no, in terms of spreadsheet entries, we should probably clarify this. You can modify the spreadsheet if you need to, but if you want users to fill out a table, um, of 20, you're saying of 20 columns by a few rows, essentially the form would need to kind of give them the ability, sort of the blocks to enter those values in. And so I don't think there is actually an easy way to sort of give people a table and say, fill out this table, and then have that table transport into Excel, unfortunately. I think the only kind of way to make that work is to ask question after question after question and get them to populate it going down the page. Um, I will check though. Let's just see if they do have that feature here. I'm pretty sure, yeah, they didn't actually have the ability to do a table entry, but honestly, that sounds like something that forms would benefit from. It's just a question, I guess, of how would you then take that table and put it into the overall structure of one row per response. And I think if Microsoft can come up with a way of getting around that, then I think it'll be great. So let's go back to the original point of this, which is trying to work out what is, I guess, interesting for users here and what you'd like to see, because we need to build a form. Let me just make this a little bit bigger, expand this out. We need to build a form to take Sydney Excel user group responses on what they want to see. The sorts of questions that we might have here. We might want to ask the question of, yeah, when when you would like each session to be run. Topics, maybe in-depthness, is that a word? It's probably not a word, but that's okay. I'm going to use it anyway. This notion of, do we want really sort of deep dives into topics, or do we want a broader range of topics that we can kind of coast over and basically just build up an appetite for, and look to try and increase awareness without necessarily going fully into a topic. Kind of put it out there. What other things would you like to see in a survey of what people would like to see? If anyone can post something in the chat or make suggestions, happy to have people unmute and chat as well. Probably made it clear this is intended to be a very interactive session, so the lack of interactivity will make this a lot harder. Okay, well, if no one wants to respond to that, let me put a question out to people who are here then. What would you like to see? Like, what sort of topics do you actually want to cover in these sorts of user groups? We've had, generally what's new. We're going to have Google Sheets. We've got forms here. We're going to have dynamic arrays in a couple of months' time. What else would you like to hear about? And at the very least, that'll give me items that I can add into the list. Okay, Tim has suggested Power Query. Excellent. So why don't I start building a question that relates to this then? Let's create a choice, and we'll give people the opportunity to add in or to respond with a number of different topics that they'd like to hear about. So what topics? Topics would you like to learn about? So Power Query. I'm going to add to this Power Pivot because that's kind of a natural extension from Power Query. What else would people like to hear about? And we'll just keep adding extra options that people can choose from.
Power tables.
Tables? Sorry, tables generally, or I thought I heard power tables.
That's right.
Power table. When you say power tables, what exactly are you talking about? Because we've got tables and we've got power pivot and
The tables.
tables. Awesome. Okay. Tables and related features. Let's call them that. So that'll probably include things like slices and so forth. Slices, pivot tables, and the like. Building models that are instantly updated versus using Power Query to run processes. Models that are instantly updated. Okay, so I guess deterministic live models, for lack of a better term, I guess. I guess that's kind of a Power Query question, so I might leave it in the Power Query side. Um, Tips on model efficiency, best practices. I like the idea of that. So efficiency, best practice. All right. Looks like someone's joined us and the microphone's not mute. If you don't mind muting that, that would be great. Thank you. Sneak peeks and future updates in Excel. Okay. Future updates, new features. Rolling financial forecasts that are cleverly automated. Sounds good. I'm going to summarize that in by saying we'll call them rolling or forecasts. Forecast modeling. We'll bundle up some of these responses because obviously there's going to be a lot of different things that that we could go into if we go into the minutiae. How-to demos on useful but little understood tools and features. Okay, how can I describe this one? So these aren't new features necessarily, but features that people just aren't aware of, right? That they might not have seen before. So we'll call these hidden gems, I guess, in Excel. Understood features. Yeah. So Carl asks, does this question allow for multiple selections? Um, that's going to be pretty important, isn't it? And luckily, at the bottom of this question, if I can get my scrolling bar to work happily, let's just create a new question underneath. Come back up here. There is a button for multiple answers. There we go. Which allows people to then check off the items that they're looking for. Because yes, it would be absolutely horrible for people to say, okay, how do I choose which one of these great topics that I actually want to get covered? So yeah, multiple answers is great, and I think if I remember correctly, the way that it ends up getting populated into the form, into Excel afterwards, is it'll have the label of the value that's been selected, with a comma space next label, comma space next label, and so on. So once we get that sort of data, we'll then need to pass that out and convert that into something that's easy to process. Okay, I'm going to add an other option that basically allows people to then type in whatever topic they want to see as well. This way, people can, they're not just restricted to the items that we have here, which is a pretty good list in any event, but they can also type in their own thing. So if someone really wants to understand how to use Power View in Excel 2013, they can ask for that. They won't necessarily get their wish, but they can ask for it nonetheless. Awesome. Okay, so those are the topics. And if I pop back over to my Excel, if I take a look at form number 1, I should see that we've got this extra question now. What topics would you like to learn about? And as people post responses to that, hopefully that'll populate nicely. So those are the topics. Done. Level of depth of topic. So do we want a deep dive? Do we want to, I guess, do a high level explainers, introductions to different sessions? This sounds like it's going to be another choice type question. So how detailed do you want presentations to be? And so maybe we can ask the question, deep dives, very detailed, moderately detailed, luxury level of explanation. And then maybe a third option, which might be something like high level overview that isn't so much intended to be an introduction, like a how-to, but an introduction to the concept, conceptual introduction. I go back to that introductory level and go introductory how-to. So if anyone can think of any other ideas of, how we might structure these levels of detail, I'm all open to ideas. But I'll take that and move on from now. Let's see, what else do we have? We want to ask, when do we want these sessions to actually occur? And so when for me is a two-part question. It's a day of the week question and it's a time of day question as well. On the one hand, day of the week. Oh, thank you. Spelling mistake. Conceptual introduction. There we go. So on one hand, time of day, preferred time of day. When would you like these sessions to occur? And I'd love to ask everyone here as well. Does a lunchtime session work for you all? I know we have a similar number to what we had last time, where we ran the session at 8 a.m. in the morning. But this time we're running it at lunchtime. I think the next session is going to be run at 8 p.m. I think Danielle's session is going to be run more of a 6 p.m. So, would love to get a sense of, I guess, different times that work. So I'm going to put in morning, say 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. We'll do a session for lunch, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. We'll have an early evening, maybe 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. and a late evening, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. So out of curiosity, Carl, would that give you the ability to, I guess, get a better sense of, when you say evening, do you mean early or late evening? Because I know some people like the early evening because it's kind of straight after work and then they can just sort of make it happen, like attend straight away. Some people prefer late evening so that they can get kids to bed and then log on and kind of actually be able to focus on what's going on. Melissa, you've got a question about, do we think we'll stay on Teams or revert to in-person meetings? That's a really great question. And I think that's something that we should probably ask. Do we, how do you prefer to attend? How do you want these sessions to be run, I suppose? How do you want I guess, how do you want to attend sessions? You're in Perth. Oh, okay. I guess you're not attending the face-to-face sessions anytime soon, or if you are, you're not going to be let back into your state anytime soon. Okay, fair enough. So let's come up with some options. Face-to-face, hybrid, i.e. some face-to-face, some virtual, and virtual only. Probably good to allow multiple options at time options. Yes, I did mean to do that. Thanks for catching me, Bing. All right. I think there's probably a better way I can actually word this question rather than how do you want to attend, or how should we run these sessions? Maybe that might be a better way of asking. Do we want to run it face-to-face, face-to-face only, I should say? Hybrid, where some, I guess let's be more specific here. Face-to-face, but also streamed online or virtual only. Let's see. I think that's a pretty good question. So thanks, Melissa, for catching me. I was talking with Danielle just beforehand that we probably need to ask this question, um, but it slipped my mind when I was putting together the list of questions. So thank you for reprompting that. Let's see, what else? I'm gonna have an open-ended question here. So something that's a bit of a general text question. Who do you think we should invite to present? And so this will be an open-ended question that people can suggest presenters to come and present for us. So if there's anyone that you can think of who is a particularly confident or good in some areas, then that they can sort of specify that and say, hey, let's invite Ken Pauls along to come talk about Power Query, or let's invite Marco Russo to come and talk about Power Pivot or something like that. Can forms identify a user? When you're doing it within your organization, you can. You do have the ability to pull out some extra information that you wouldn't have in a public setting. And so if I look at the form, let's see, not this one. Sorry, let's go back to this form over here. I take a look at my form settings, if I can find my mouse. Um, you'll see some of the information it captures include name and email address, and that's specifically for people who are signed in at that point in time. So if you send a form out to someone in your organization, and they're required to be logged in to actually answer to be able to answer the form. So in that case, within the organization, you can guarantee who that's actually coming from. So that's useful. That's potentially useful, I should say, from a tracking perspective. That might also be, I guess, not ideal if people are if you're trying to collect anonymous information, like if you're trying to do an HR type task, and you don't want to know who's actually submitted the answers. If you're submitting a public response, then if I'm not mistaken, I think if they happen to be logged in, so if they've logged into Office online and they've ticked the box that says keep me logged in all the time, then when they answer the form, we'll get that information. But otherwise, it'll just come up as anonymous, and you won't actually see who the user is. So it depends is the answer. Um, Danielle says, yes, they have to be logged in order to identify them. Yeah, 100%. So, if someone's not logged in, then they either can't answer your form or there's no details about them. So I think it's almost the same as if you were to share a document online, where if any changes that they make, you'll be able to see those changes logged and tagged to their name, if they're logged in. But if it's an anonymous user, if they're logging in, or if they haven't logged in yet, it'll just come up with guest user or anonymous or some sort of private no contact details approach. Alrighty. Any other questions at the moment, by the way? Either questions about forms or questions for the form to add on. Let's see. So who do we think we should invite to present? How should we run these sessions? Preferred time of day, how detailed, topics to learn about. How hard is it to have a dynamic list of questions and answers in forms? Oh, Bing, you always ask the tough questions. Yeah, hard. Um, it's yeah, that's not an easy task as far as I'm aware. Part of the problem is I think that the way forms has been designed is it's been designed um, to effectively take to work in isolation. And so the idea is you should be able to create a form without having that Excel document behind it. So uh, there's not necessarily a data validation or a table to be able to kind of pull responses from. Um, and I think that'd be a really great tool to have. So I'm not sure who's on the forms team, but I'll probably recommend it or submit it to the user voice channel if they haven't got that already. Um, but yeah, that's a really great idea. Carl, you're asking, can you restrict company users to only answer once? Um, I'm not sure is the answer. I need to come back to you on that one. My guess is that um, you probably can restrict them, but I'm just not familiar enough with it because I haven't done much within company restrictions. Um, that being said, I know that what your data is coming out in a table. So if you wanted to only take the most recent response or only take their first response, that could be a way to effectively change, sort of stop people from answering multiple times. Um, I'm pretty sure that company users can actually answer multiple times because you might want the ability for people to have a single form that they always submit feedback on. So I could have a standard feedback form and use that as my basic template, and then everyone keeps going back to that to lodge their submission for feedback for whatever topic or meeting or presentation has just happened. Um, so I don't think there's a restriction on responses per se, but if you did want to restrict what you're actually pulling in from a data perspective, your data's in a table. So Power Query is kind of your best bet. I can see another question's about to come in. What I might do for now, though, is just do a little bit of cleanup here while I'm just waiting for the next question. This is a form to help understand what people are looking for in our user group presentations. Our responses will help guide the future of our presentations and help us tailor our sessions to be on items that you are interested in. Let's do a final. Do you have any other questions or comments? It's worth noting as well, I haven't gone into this, but you may have seen on some of the pop-ups, you can make certain questions optional. So if I were to look at this question, for example, I've got multiple answers as one item, but I've also got required. Um, and so if you think about forms that you submit online, where you must enter this before you move on to the next section, you can actually sort of force people to do that as well. Um, so the way I've got this form, by the way, this is all on a single page. If I actually wanted to have a multi-page form, I can set that up by adding a new section. So there's a section over here. This allows me to basically create a page two of my form. And when they get to the bottom of that first page, instead of hitting submit, there'll be a button that says next, and that'll move them to the next section of the form to then scroll and work through. So that's one thing you can do to kind of make this a little bit, I guess, easier. There's also a bit of branching that you can do as well. Branching is essentially the ability to take a look at someone's earlier responses and push them down a certain path. So going back to Bing's question, you can't have a dynamic list, but you can have responsive questions to that list. So, for example, if someone said that they wanted to have deep dive presentations here, I might have a branching section that allows me to basically ask the question, if they select deep dive, then let's go into section 2 that has more details. Um, so let's go into here, go to where is it? Go to the next question, or alternatively, let's actually create a proper question, section 2 question here. Let's go out of branching. Page 2 of my form, let's add another section, page 3. This section over here will be specific deep dive questions. What level of detail do you want? I'm going to discard this question afterwards, by the way, because I don't really want to do this branching exercise right now. But I just wanted to show how the branching would work, at least. So with my branching over here, I can add some branching that says effectively go to the specific deep dive questions if I answer that. Otherwise, if I don't answer that, just click on the next items and sort of don't worry too much. Um, and then when I get to the bottom of this, maybe I don't want the people who answered everything in section 1 to then move to the deep dive questions. I want them to move straight on to section 3. So I can then push them on and skip that question if they haven't answered the right thing earlier on. So these are some ways you can basically add on some additional logic into the way you set up your form. And the way I've seen this in the past done is if people tick a box saying you want to have a session in the morning, then it moves into a morning quiz section that sort of asks you questions about, what what time in the morning, what sort of session in the morning, what sort of breakfast cereal do you want, that sort of thing, right? Uh, so yeah, that's how the branching works. So I'm gonna just pull out that branching just so I don't break it, and I'll leave my form as is. So let's remove this section and remove that section too. Hopefully that means the branching is now being removed. Yes, good. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, and I think I've got a form that kind of does everything that we're looking for. Should I get rid of this extra question here? Delete. I guess then the only thing now to do is to basically share and publish this. So what I'm going to do is allow anyone to respond to this quiz. We're going to copy this quiz, and I'm going to put it into the meeting chat right now and pop back to Excel. And if anyone decides to go ahead and respond to the form that I've put into the chat, we should start seeing the answers populate the Excel sheet as well. So if you want to have a little go at populating your thoughts of the questions now, if you're in front of a computer, if you're on your phone, you can easily pick this up, then yeah, that'd be great. One thing that you can do as well, if I'm not mistaken, I believe you can get a QR code that you can use as well. So again, if people are sort of putting this onto their devices, pulling it up onto their devices, it's just much easier to follow rather than clicking on a link. So I could copy that and paste that into a chat. So yeah, there's a number of different ways that you can actually share this. So if anyone does actually decide to submit this form, not expecting everyone to here, please do feel free to let me know so that we can know when to expect the data to start coming in. But yeah, if you're watching this online afterwards, then please do fill out this form. It's going to be useful for us to just understand what it is that you're looking for and what you'd like to see more of. And I'll be advertising this in both the LinkedIn chat and the meetup group as well. Uh, so while we're waiting, does anyone have any sort of last questions before we kind of move on? While we're waiting for questions, I'll just point out the next session that we're going to be running will be run by Excel MVP David Benaim. David is based in Cambodia, and he's going to be running a session on where Google Sheets beats Excel. One of the things that I always found interesting about David and his area of expertise is that he's not a sort of a super hyper Excel focused individual like myself and many other Excel MVPs. He's a bit more of a generalist and kind of touches on PowerPoint and Word and Outlook and a whole range of different tools. But more importantly than that, he dabbles a lot in Google Sheets. And he's basically collected over the years a list of areas where Google Sheets has been, well and truly outperforming what Excel on the web can do. And to be honest, that's not actually that hard. Excel on the web isn't quite as capable as Google Sheets in a lot of ways, but also where Google Sheets actually outperforms Excel desktop too. And so while desktop has been introducing new features and Excel on the web has been improving in leaps and bounds, David's basically been, I guess, sort of showcasing where some of those features still are kind of missing a bit of functionality. And so, an example of that would be like data validation in Excel on the web. This is an area where things have just been catching up where Excel has now got this ability to do some data validation, and be able to start typing in values and truncate the data validation list to only feature those values that kind of start with what you're typing in. And that's new in Excel on the web. It's not an Excel desktop yet, but it's been around in Google Sheets for ages. And so David's going to be running a session on where some of those pitfalls are and where Excel could improve, or where you might want to use Google Sheets for your solution, because Excel isn't necessarily the best solution for everything. So we've had 4 responses, so fantastic. Paul, Tim, Matt, and Danielle, thank you very much for responding and saving me in this regard. So you can see where how this form is now being, or this table is now being populated by responses. See preferred times, topics that people want, broken down by semicolons. So it wasn't commas as I thought, semicolons. Who do you think we should get in? Barack Obama, excellent. Not sure who Nikki Bull is, so I'm going to need to look her up. Any sort of expert users, technical specialists, brilliant. Moderately detailed is also useful. Awesome. Okay, take this all on board. So yeah, this is forms. I'm going to be able to take the data out of this and put it into Power Pivot, put it into Power Query, pop it up into a Power BI dashboard, and just generally be able to turn this into meaningful information quite easily. So that is essentially everything that I wanted to chat about with forms and Excel. Hopefully people found it useful. If you haven't, let me know as well. That's also useful to know. But if you learned something, that's great, and that's really what this is all about. Just trying to explore what are the different tools in the Office family that you may or may not have run into, and how you can start using that in what it is that you do. So I guess any last final questions before we wrap up? I won't sort of hold people here longer than you need to. Final slide, where to find us and where to basically sign up for further information. We'll keep posting updates on the meetup group and the LinkedIn group, and if you're not a member of either of those, please do go check those out. That's generally where I'll post updates and notes to these sessions, links to the actual sessions themselves, and where I'll update, I'll post the links to the videos once they're posted on YouTube afterwards. So even if you can't attend the session live, you'll still have the ability to kind of watch it after the fact. Okay, see a couple of people typing, so I'll just give it one more minute to ask any final questions. Carl, Melissa, thank you for coming. I hope it's been useful. If not, what I might do is end the recording, and then if people want to hang around and ask any questions afterwards, you're more than welcome to hang around and chat. So I'll wrap this up here. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for watching online, and look forward to seeing you next month for David's session. Thanks, everyone.